here, then you need locking code. And we don't want locking code, especially if we're going to implement the setter and getter ourselves, which we're going to sometimes. Okay? But the default here is that we don't implement this setter and getter. It's automatically in there for us. So you can see there's three parts to this. There's the @ synthesize. You see that? That's basically just saying underbar contents is the name of the instance variable in which the property contents is going to be stored. Now we could say @ synthesize contents equals foo, and then contents property would be stored in an instance variable called foo. But that would be very confusing. So we always use underbar name of the property. Okay? And so that's part one, just basically allocating an instance variable to store this contents property. Then there's the getter. That's NSString contents, return contents. So the dash parentheses NSString star contents is a method declaration in Objective-C. The dash means this is a method. Parentheses NSString star means this is a method that returns a pointer to a string. Then contents is the name of the method. Okay, so the name of the method of the getter is the same as the name of the property. Then the implementation is just return that instance variable that we synthesized. Okay? And similarly, the next method is a method in Objective-C for setting it. And again, dash because it's a method. Parentheses void means this method does not return anything. Okay, that's what parentheses void means. Then set contents colon, that's the name of this method. Set contents colon. Parentheses NSString star is the argument to this method. Contents is just the name of the argument, the local name of the variable in the local context. And the implementation is just underbar contents, our instance variable, equals that argument. Okay? So before I move on, does everyone understand how these two methods are allowing you to set and get an NSString storage space inside your card? Everyone understand that? Question?
What's the synthesize line?
Okay, so the synthesize line, again, is just specifying the name of the instance variable that we're going to use to store this stuff in, underbar contents. It's kind of weird. You could maybe, it might be better saying @ synthesize contents to use instance variable with name, underbar contents. That equals, I know, is a little weird. It sounds like it's assigning something, but it's just, that's what it is. You think of that equals as, you know, we'll use the instance variable with the name, underbar content. So that's what the synthesize is doing. If you don't put the synthesize in there, it's not going to create the space in your card instance. And there won't be any name for it, so you can't refer to it in your getter and setter. Okay, everyone understand this? Any other questions? Okay, now, the thing about it is, when you type the @ property on the left, this gets added to your @ implementation. However, you will not see it there. Okay? So it's there, but you don't see it. Okay, Objective-C has made it for you, but it doesn't show it to you. But it's there. Okay? That setter method and that setter getter method are there. Okay? They exist. And not only that, they're public, because you put that @ property declaration in your header file. Everyone got that? So let's look at another couple of properties just to see the syntax a little more. So here's two properties. They're Booleans. Okay? There's no Boolean primitive in C, so Objective-C has defined type-def all caps bool. It's probably a short or something, or an int or char, or I don't know what, but you can think of it as a primitive type that's a Boolean. Its value can either be yes, which is some non-zero value, or no, which is 0. And these properties don't need the strong or weak. Do you understand why that is? Because they're primitive types. They're not stored in the heap. Okay? They're just like an int or a float. So there's no memory to manage, so you don't need to know about strong and weak pointers. There's no pointers involved here. This is just a bool, a Boolean. So there's no strong or weak. But we still have the non-atomic, because we still want the setter and the getter to be simple, not have any locking code or any of that business. So we're always going to have non-atomic on every property in this class. We will not have a single property in this entire class that's not non-atomic. So just put it in there. I wish it were the default. Okay? But that's what we're going to do. You can see we've synthesized them both. And we've got the setter and the getter for them both. And this is all being done for us by Objective-C. Now, one thing that's kind of cool is we may not like the name of this getter because we want our code to read something like, if card is chosen, then do something. If card is matched, then do something. So we really want the getter called is chosen, not just chosen. You know, if card chosen, not as nice as if card is chosen. So it's actually possible to rename the getter. by saying getter equals the new name you want. Okay, and that's essentially renamed it. Same thing, we'll do the same thing with this one. Getter equals is matched. Now that getter is called is matched. And I bring this up because you're going to see how iOS does this with Boolean properties. It tends to rename them to is this or has this, depending on what the verb there is. Okay, and again, Objective-C is writing all this code in the implementation, but you don't see it. But it's there. Okay, now we're going to talk about why properties are good and why it's better than just accessing instance variables directly in later lectures. But the bottom line is it's good for doing things like bounds checking. It's good for doing things like when you set a property and you want to update the UI. It's doing good for things for initializing pointers. Like that NSString star contents property is going to start off nil. All properties in Objective-C, all of them, start off 0. So for a pointer, that's nil. Okay? So that contents property, when we create a new card, is going to not point to any contents. That card's going to be blank. Okay? It's not going to have anything on it. So it's nice to use the setter and getter. We implement our own setter and getter that will check to see if it's nil. And if it's not, and sometimes, not with contents, but with some properties, if it's nil, we'll create something in memory. Okay? So that's another reason to use it. So you'll see all these reasons why we want properties in the next lecture, basically. All right, so now let's look at a method. Okay, just a regular old method. You've seen some methods, the setter and getter methods. But what if we want to define our own method, our own public method? So I'm going to define this method called match. Remember that I'm building a model here for a card matching game, where I'm going to put all these cards on the screen, and the user's going to try and match them, pick ones that match. All right? So I need a match method, a method that tells me whether two cards match. Okay? So I'm trying to make this simple, so I've made a simple match method that has the following semantics. It takes another card as the argument, and it returns an integer. That integer is 0 if the cards don't match. Otherwise, it's an integer that is higher the better a match it is. Okay? So like a really good match might be 1,000, but a not so good match might only be 100, or it could be 1. Now, the semantics of what that number is totally depends on the cards, because we're only going to match cards against other cards, right? And we're going to find out how good a match they are by how that whatever that card class is. And we're going to make a subclass of this class called playing card that's going to give more points for matching the rank, okay, than it is for matching the suit. Okay? But that's up to subclasses of card to determine what the point system is. Okay? So for our implementation of match, okay, we're going to do a really simple implementation. So first, let's assume that they don't match. Okay, so I just made this local variable int score equals 0. You can see that you can assign a variable. Actually, all local variables also start out 0, so I don't even really need that equals 0. But I'm a big believer in putting that in if that's really, you know, what you intend. And in this case, I intend the score to be actually 0, the score of this match, until I go and see if these cards match, right? So it's just a kind of programming style thing here. So how am I going to tell if this card that's being passed in match matches the card that it's being sent to? And the answer is I'm going to send some messages. Okay? You see the open square brackets notation there? That's the first time you're seeing me send a message in Objective-C. And I'm also sending two other messages in this one line. Card.contents and self.contents. You see both of those? Those are message sends as well. So there's two different syntaxes here for sending a message. One is open square brackets, okay, and we'll talk about that one in a second. And another one is dot notation, card.contents. When do we use them? We only use the dot notation for properties. That's how we call the setter and getter of properties, using dot notation. Okay? Now, here we're calling the getter. Card.contents is calling the getter of the contents property on the card instance. Okay? How do we call the setter? Exactly the same. Card.contents, but we put it on the left-hand side of an equals. Card.contents equals, now we're calling the setter for contents. You see? So here we're calling the getter. We're also calling the getter for contents on self, on our self. So in other languages this might be called this, right? But you know what self is, right? Self is this instance that this code is operating on. So we are going to compare these two strings, card.contents and self.contents, to see if they are equal. And we're going to do that with the NSString method is equal to string colon. So in it is equal to string colon can only be sent to a string. So is equal to string can only be sent to a string, and card.contents is a getter method that returns an NSString. So we're good to go, right? We're sending is equal to string to a string. And the is equal to string takes as an argument an NSString. And again, self.content is a getter method that returns an NSString. Therefore, we have satisfied all the requirements of is equal to string. And we put square brackets around it. And it's going to return a Boolean. Is equal to string is defined to return a Boolean whether the contents of those two strings are the same. Notice we did not say equals equals. Okay? We did not say card.contents equals equals self.contents. Because we'd just be comparing the pointers then, not what the pointers point to. Okay? Everyone understand why we didn't use equals equals to see if those two strings are the same? So if those strings are the same, I'm going to give 1 point. Okay? So this is the dirt simple implementation of match, which is if the cards are exactly the same, their contents are exactly the same, I'll get 1 point. Otherwise, you get 0. Okay? Now, we're going to do much better implementation of match when we do playing card, but this is our kind of dirt simple one. Now, to give you just a little more about Objective-C, what if we change this method? Oh, so yeah, here's a little bit about who's the sender and who's the receiver here. You can look at this on the slides later. Okay? But I'm going to make this a little more complicated. I'm going to make the argument to match be an array of cards. Okay? So now I'm matching this card that I'm sending this to a whole bunch of other cards. So now I'm going to need some new algorithm to match, right? So again, a playing card match, if let's say you have matching 3 cards, you might give a lot of points if all 3 cards are the same rank. They're all jacks. You get a lot of points. If only 2 of them are jacks and the other one's something else, you don't get very many points at all. If they're all 3 of the same suit, you kind of get a medium amount of points. You see what I mean? So here I'm changing match to take an array as the argument instead of just a single card. And how would I change my implementation to deal with that? Well, I'm just going to put a for loop around my if and iterate through all the cards. And so this implementation, hopefully those of you who are quick thinkers, you can know what this does. This gives you 1 point if the card that's receiving this matches any of the cards in the array. Any, not all, any. Okay? Now you could imagine a lot better algorithms here. Maybe you get 1 point for every card you match in the array, or you get 2 points for 1 match and 4 points for 2 and 8 points for 3, or, you know, or some sort of binary thing, exponential point, whatever. This is first day of lecture. We're just going to give 1 point if it matches any, okay? But mostly what I wanted to show you here is what it looks like to have an array as the argument instead of a single card, so that you understand that the argument, what the argument to the method is. And also so I can show you the for loop there. You see that for in? A lot of languages have that these days. That just basically means it's a for loop where it's going to go through every object in that NS array and assign it to card. Card is the iteration variable. And execute that if once for each of the cards in the array. Everyone understand that? If you have a question about that, ask. No? Yeah?
Well, kind of. Would that foreign line make any sense if you omitted the asterisk?
Okay, that's a great question. So the question is, if I just had that for line, but I said for card, card, not for card star card in other cards, okay, we'd get a syntax error. Why? Because all objects are always pointed to, so we always have that star, okay? Always, right? You can't have a card not being a pointer to it, so Objective-C would give you a syntax error there. It's impossible to not have that star. Whenever you have the name of a class, it's always going to have that star. Question?
Can we use the bracket format for getter and setter methods?
Yes, the question is, another great one, can I use the square brackets to call the setter and getter instead of using that dot notation? And that's a really insightful question, and the answer is absolutely you can. It's perfectly legal because that setter and getter are completely normal methods. There's nothing special about them whatsoever. Okay?